JP Crawford is up, and up with me right now is our Phillies insider, Frank Klose of 97.3 ESPN.com. What's going on, Frank?
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Everything's good, pal, and I guess good news for the Phils as they decided to move J.P. Crawford up. Now, the numbers don't, come flying off the page at you. 265, 3 homers, 13 RBIs, 8 doubles, 5 steals. He does a lot of everything there. He's, very versatile, very good fielder, just 21 years old. Give us your thoughts on why the move was made today to move him up.
In some respects, I really don't know. As you said, he really wasn't tearing the cover off the ball with the bat. In some cases, he's made some defensive gaps as well. So I'm really kind of surprised that the Phillies would move him up already, considering, as you mentioned, that he is the youngest position player at AAA. So I guess the Phillies have figured out, granted, I don't get to see him play every day, so the people that do get to see him every day, sometimes numbers don't tell the whole story. So they must feel that he's ready to be challenged by some AAA pitching, which often includes a lot of former Major League pitchers that can challenge him in a way he's not being challenged right now. So I guess the goal is to get him that advanced competition and see if he might be in the Phillies' plans by next season.
Yeah, and I guess the obvious question would be, all right, he's up at AAA. What if he starts performing well and handles himself there and the Phillies' offense is still struggling? Do they have an eye on that to say, let's see if this guy can handle AAA pitching? Could we see him possibly help this team in a late July, August situation?
I think it's possible. Now, Aaron Nola, if you remember, spent a whole 5 weeks in AAA last year. So I don't know that the Phillies feel a sense of urgency to move him to the Major League. But like I said, if he can get some exposure to more competitive pitching, if he falls flat on his face, I think it'll be pretty clear that they might want to reevaluate whether or not next year he might be ready. But I think the Phillies are just looking to see if he could be ready by next year, and that could include a September call-up, since if they really feel like he'll be on the Phillies to start 2017, the September call-up isn't going to kill his service time and make the Phillies lose him sooner. So if next year's it, you might see him get a cup of coffee towards the end of the year.
Yeah, the Phillies report today on Twitter, by the way, was the Phillies Twitter account, their media Twitter account, that shortstop J.P. Crawford is promoted to Valley. We talked about him being the youngest player there at 21, youngest pitcher, Zach Eflin, at 22. Frank, give us a little insight on, we keep saying one of the things to be excited about with the Phillies is, yes, their current big league roster is pitching very well, and that is kind of why they are here. But the more exciting part, I think, is they got help on the way. They got some other younger pitchers behind them. Give us a little insight on what those guys are doing down at AAA.
Well, Zach Eflin, he might stand out the most among the pitchers because right now he's 5-0 with a 2.2 run average. That's in 7 starts so far. He struck out 39 at this point over his 7 starts. So he's showing a lot of consistency at AAA, and somebody like him, you get to a point where the competition isn't going to be any better, and he can demonstrate that he can pitch against AAA. Now, this is his first year in AAA. I don't think they're going to rush Zach Eflin. I think being that he's not on the Phillies' 40-man roster just yet, they won't be in a rush to put him on, definitely by the offseason. But I think they're going to be a little bit of a numbers game with him in terms of the 40-man roster. And they have to be very careful kind of who they can promote and who they don't promote. Because they want to hold on to as many assets as they possibly can. So I would keep an eye on him for maybe next year if he gets a full year at AAA and he really does well. Maybe a September call-up, but if they do, that means somebody else would have to be knocked off that 40-man roster. Now, Mark Appel, he started out a little bit more strong than he's pitched recently, but he's 3-2 with a 3.58 ERA in his 7 starts. His first few starts were lights out, as we frequently talked about here before on the station, but the last few were a little bit rough. He had a 5-run, 5-inning outing, followed by a couple more outings where he didn't pitch out of the 5th inning. Into the 6th inning. So Appel is taking a little bit of a second, but overall he still looks pretty good. And again, he's another one who's not on the 40-man roster. And then when you look at Jake Thompson, he's put together a couple good starts in a row where he didn't give up any earned runs. and he now sits at 2-4 with a 3.32 ERA. Which isn't terrible. He had a couple rough outings where he gave up 5 earned runs, but other than that, he's been pretty strong. So sometimes the numbers don't tell the whole story. So out of the 3 of them, they probably will get to cook for the rest of the year. The one that might get your attention first, if the Phillies need a pitcher, would be Alec Asher. Now, I know a lot of Phillies fans might not have pleasant memories of Alec Asher from last season because it really wasn't fair to him. He was just sort of thrown into the mix at the Phillies' rotation out of just bare necessity, and so he was a little bit ahead. Now he pitched a couple of really good games, including one gem that was almost a complete game, where he went 8 2/3 innings. And I think he really opened the eyes of a few scouts down there as somebody who could potentially find his way into the major league roster soon. So that would be one I would keep an eye on looking forward. In terms of those 4 minor leaguers, now I think I said to you before that one thing that they could do is bring David Buchanan back up. Now I know that name doesn't excite a lot.
Stop right there.
Yeah, David Buchanan's the 5th one there, and he's pitching okay lately. He just came off a 7-inning 1-run outing, which followed up an 8-inning 1-run outing. So he's pitching okay at AAA, and being that he's on the 40-man roster, it might be somebody to keep an eye on as time goes on there.
Talking with Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. You can follow Frank on Twitter at Frank Klose with a K, 973, Frank Klose 973. And don't forget to check out the stuff over at sportstalkphilly.com with the guys at Philadelphia.com. That's where you'll see expanded Phillies coverage from Frank Klose and the guys. 5 consecutive games started by Nola the Phillies have won. He'll pitch tonight against the Braves. What I find to be amazing here is the Braves obviously are the worst team in baseball. They stink. They're actually better on the road than they are at home. If the Phillies were to sweep this series, they'd be 10 games over 500. That would be another winning series for them. Even if they take 2 or 3, they're 8 games over 500. So they have a really good shot to end this series in a spot that no one could envision here. And with Aaron Nola on the mound to start things off, you got to feel pretty good if you're the Phillies entering the 20th day of May.
Yeah, who would have thought for a brief while on Wednesday, because they played the day game, they were actually tied for first place, which certainly was, they were a Mets victory away from, actually ending yesterday in first place. But the Nationals did beat up on the Mets. But I think the biggest thing to look at with the Phillies' record is just how well they've done against their own division, which is pretty good. If you look at the standings in the division, the Marlins were pretty good, and I think we saw, we just saw the Marlins play firsthand this past week, and the Marlins really are nothing to take lightly, and they've entered that series almost with the same record, and Miami's 2 games over 500. You have the Mets 4 games over 500. Phillies, as we just mentioned, and the Nationals 9 games over 500. So. The whole division looks pretty good. I mean, and I think it's more than just them beating up on the Braves. When the division has played each other, it's been pretty competitive. So a lot will depend on how the Phillies do up in an upcoming series. They're going to play the Chicago Cubs this next weekend. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Let's see how they continue to do against the Nationals, who are the division leaders. But they definitely have been pretty competitive, and they actually have 2 series against the Cubs. So that might be a really good indication. They have one next weekend, and they have one the second week of June as well. So keep an eye on how they do against some of those stronger competition teams that the Phillies are going to face in upcoming weeks.
They did sweep the Nationals earlier, and you're right. Let's see what they do coming up down the road here. I think once that calendar turns to June, we'll start to evaluate a little bit more. You just posted something at 973ESPN.com about the draft. Frank, give us a little update on what could be happening with the draft.
Yeah, Keith Wallace was reporting that the Phillies are not going to select Jason Groom out of Barnegat High School, which when we went into this season, now part of the problem is when the Phillies were awarded the pick, and everybody started to think about who the Phillies could select in the draft in June. Now, we're still a couple of weeks out from the draft, but we didn't have them play their 2016 seasons yet. So, and as we've talked about before, Groom had that half-season suspension at Barnegat. The Phillies also spent time looking at A.J. Puck out of Florida. Perhaps didn't totally impress them. So right now, the draft is kind of up in the air. Now, the one name maybe to keep an eye on right now is Kyle Lewis out of Mercer University in Georgia. He's somebody. It'd be nice if they could steal him away from the Atlanta Braves. But Kyle Lewis is the type of player that the Braves like to take. The top talent who lives locally. But they might actually take a position player, which really wasn't a consideration all that long ago. And Lewis is a power-hitting center fielder. So granted that the Phillies have some bats in the system, but none of them have yet to rise to the top in the outfield. So maybe Kyle Lewis would be who the Phillies take, but it's kind of hard to say. Matt Klentak, Phillies GM, has sort of indicated that they're zeroing in on somebody. We don't know who it is, but it's starting to sound like it's not going to be Groom, and it might not be Puck.
All right, we'll keep our eyes on that. Definitely, we'll try to get Keith Law on the show next week to give more insight on that. Frank Klose has more on that at 973ESPN.com. He's at Frank Klose with a K, 973. And don't forget, for more on the Phillies from Frank and the guys at Philadelphia.com, part of SportsTalkPhilly.com. Have a good weekend, pal.
Thanks, you too, Mike.